Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the first edition of the Analog Conference. My name is Mathys. I'm the Director of Industry and Market Trends based in Montreal. Lovely to be here in Toronto with you guys. We had a great session in Montreal, another great one in Vancouver, and I'm sure we're going to have a fantastic one today. I want to say hello to the Facebook friends if they're with us already. All right, hey, how's it going? Thank you for being there as well. And before we begin, I want to introduce you to our very, very important partners. So please welcome Dr. Glenn Laurie, Acting Dean at the Faculty of Arts here at OCAD.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome everybody. I'm pleased to be up here acknowledging your presence here, and it's nice to see people out on a snowy day. On behalf of OCAD University, it's my pleasure to acknowledge the traditional and ancestral territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who were the custodians of the lands on which we live, create, and work. OCAD U was founded in 1876 and is the oldest specialized art and design university in Canada. It's also one of the largest in North America, making this a crucial hub for creative and cultural production. Our faculty, staff, and students pride themselves on being on the cutting edge of new forms of creative thinking and cultural production. Programs like Digital Futures, Expanded Animation, integrated media, and interaction design, to name but the most obvious, are shaping the present and future of screen-based and artificial intelligence supported cultural production. But beyond this, digital tools, AR, VR, artificial intelligence are deeply intertwined in all that we do here, in painting, in sculpture, in photography, in performance, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us to welcome you. So I'll pass it over. Have a great conversation. Thank you for coming to OCAD U.
Thank you so much. And one last very important partner, of course, Telefilm Canada. Please welcome Francesca Accinelli, Director of Promotion and Communications.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Telefilm Canada, welcome to Analog. We're very proud to be a partner. It's so important for us as an institution to continue evolving, to continue to broaden the spectrum of not just our knowledge, but the business intelligence that exists in all the different sectors that we have here in Canada. And today, I think what I'm most eager to understand is what will the impact of artificial intelligence be, not just on our industry, but all the other industries. Is it positive? Is it negative? We need to explore the critical role that it's going to be playing moving forward. As we know, AI is consistently in our homes through, I look at my Google friend, Google, Siri with my kids yelling at Alexa every morning to turn on the radio, to even my favorite, that AI is helping to write Hallmark Christmas movies, which I'm a big fan of. So I'm eager to see that one finally produced. And today's discussions will also explore the potential of AI in expanding not just creative sectors, but how do we integrate the different mediums and the different practices. The insights from today's experts are going to highlight the different breakthroughs that have taken place so far, but also look ahead to what we're going to see in the near future and I hope in the distant future. I would like to really take a moment to congratulate Catherine. It's a lot of hard work. Your team has been amazing with Maxime and everyone. These partnerships between Telefilm Canada and the Canada Media Fund are vital for us moving forward. So thank you for coming out on a snowy day, and keep your minds open and enjoy.
Listen, we're from Montreal. This is not a snowy day. This is not a snowy day. This is, some stuff coming down. It's very okay. So again, very happy to be here. Thank you, Francesca, and thanks to OCAD for welcoming us here. All right. So let's get started. let's talk about AI and creativity, right? We've all heard about AI. We hear about AI constantly in the media. And with regards to creativity, we hear a lot about it too, right? We've heard about those algorithms composing music. We've heard about those ones who come up with new paintings that, get sold for ridiculous prices at auctions. So we hear about that once in a while in the media. But sometimes I get the feeling that those types of works come to the forefront of the headlines when it forces us to kind of examine our role as humans in the whole spectrum. So what's in it for us? What sets us apart, really? When I was growing up, so I'm going to date myself here, brace for it, in the 70s and 80s, we used to compare ourselves to, other living organisms with our intelligence, right? We were the intelligent species. That was us. That was what set us apart. That made us human. And of course, with time, we learn, and we know that's not true. There are very many different forms of intelligence, and I'm not sure we have the biggest one. But anyway, that's up to debate. The one thing that has changed, I feel, I don't know how you feel about that, is that we no longer compare ourselves to other animals when it comes to what humans are. We tend more and more to compare ourselves to machines, to computers. And that's a very, obviously, different ballgame. Because if we're going to do that, we can't use intelligence as a comparison tool. Not going to work. That battle has been lost, people. And it's not even a battle. Let's go back to the history of computer science. We came up with computers during the Second World War to win wars. We wanted machines to calculate faster, to store more information, basically to be better than us at certain things. That was the point, right? That is why we wanted those computers. So, of course, they are smarter on certain tasks. That's what we wanted them to be. So, again, forcing us to look at ourselves, what are we in the whole realm of things? What sets us apart? Our sensitivity, perhaps, could be our emotions. Facebook, I know you have a lot of emotions. We all do. And perhaps the way that we channel those emotions and that sensitivity through art, through creativity. And before I go on any further, perhaps I should come up with some sort of definition so that we have something to work with when it comes to creativity. Because, creativity could be anything, right? So let's just start with this. So how about creativity being producing something new and valuable, starting from existing structures, right? Because if you keep within your existing structures, then you're going to keep making the same thing. So you kind of have to bend the rules, right? You kind of have to break the rules if you want to make something new and valuable. So that's not something that's just for artists. We're creative that way every single day. I'm sure you were very creative from the moment you got up this morning, trying to adapt to different situations that you couldn't foresee and that you had to come up with a solution for. So creativity is something that is very, very wide, of course. And that is not something that we really wanted for our machines, right? Because the way that we saw computers was, you have a recipe and you get out what you put in, right? If you want a chocolate cake, then you make the recipe for the chocolate cake. You don't expect a banana bread. That's not what you're looking for. And that's pretty much how we saw computers for a very long time. Now, moving along with AI, of course, and technical advances, let me take you to 2016. let me take you to AlphaGo, which is the machine that beat the best human at the game of Go, Lisa Dahl. Now, there's nothing really, outstanding in a machine beating a human at a game. Mind you, the game of Go is much more complex than chess, so that in itself was quite a feat. We knew we'd get there. We didn't think we'd get there quite that fast. But I mean, machines have beaten humans at other games in the past all the time. I mean, you remember, Deep Blue in the 90s. So, I mean, that stuff happens. But what was very special about the way that AlphaGo beat Lisa Dahl is that it came up with strategies that we had never thought about before. So, I'm asking you, is that creative? Is that creativity? Is that a form of creativity? Does that mean that creativity is not just for humans? Ooh, I don't have music here, but I would if I could. So that's a question I want us to ask ourselves today. Can machines be creative without humans? And if so, what's the impact on us, on what we do? So I asked the question to someone who knows a little bit more about this subject matter than me. He is the Turing Award winner and deep learning pioneer, Yoshua Bengio.
Creativity is a really interesting concept because until recently, many people thought that would be out of reach of computers for a long time. But actually, in the last few years, we've made pretty amazing progress, in particular with some of the generative neural nets that we invented here in Montreal. They can synthesize new images, for example, faces of people that don't exist, and new sounds, new speech, new texts. So clearly we have creative machines. Now they're not as good as us humans because they don't understand the world nearly as well as we do. But I think in the future we will see more and more of these machines that have creativity. In fact, these tools are already being used by artists around the world for images in particular. And I think the next step in terms of research is something more like imagination, where we create something abstract, not just like pixels of images.
Don't you like the next step? I mean, that's pretty impressive. So let's get started with our panel. I'm going to welcome our panelists on stage. So please welcome Zhang, founder of Greenlight Essentials, Steve Engels, professor at the Department of Computer Science at the University of Toronto, and Shauna Jean Doherty, new media art curator and critic. So welcome. Come on in, you guys. Thank you. Have a seat for this very interesting topic. So what did you think about my definition of creativity? Is that a good starting point, or would you add to it? How do you feel?
I mean, the one thing they were saying was that it should be within certain bounds, right? That's tough, right? Because you want to make sure that they don't repeat things that have been done before, but you don't want them to go crazy and create things that no one's willing to accept.
Right.
Right? Like there's the idea of making new music, and then there's making awful music.
Right? Awful music.
But both of them are creative.
But humans can do that too. Yeah. I mean, mind you, right? It's not just machines. Mm-hmm. But I guess perhaps you mean that humans, in that sense, are the ones who are going to put the value on something, right?
Yep. So there is still a set of bounds that you need to stay within. And so getting outside of what's already been created, but staying within those bounds is the tricky part.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think when it comes to creativity in relation to art, the human role is essential, and I think intentionality is really important for creativity, so I would never suggest that an AI algorithm has the same kind of intentionality that a human does. And I think that artworks are meaningful to other humans because they're made by humans and they're expressing and reflecting on the human condition. So that's a piece that I think gets lost often when we're talking about AI-generated artwork. There's a tendency to talk about the autonomy of these machines that are making the artworks, and I always want to reinsert the role of the human in that process, because I think that's really critical.
And comforting, too. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Zhang, how do you see creative machines? I mean, can they be creative?
Well, I think they can on a certain level, right? When we define creativity or any kind of problem and trying to apply machine learning or AI to it, we're really breaking it down to generally two parts, right? A systematic part and a random part. And I think creativity deals more with the random part of it, right? The part that's unexplainable, where there's not really much pattern to find. But when someone talks about creativity, they try to combine both into one. And what we do is we're trying to find in that realm of creativity which part of it is systematic, that we can forecast, that we can predict, and what part of it is still random, that we leave to people to do their job the best.
So you're looking for patterns in creativity, is what you're saying. So tell us a bit about what you do at Greenlight Essentials.
Sure. So, at Greenlight Essentials, we use cutting-edge machine learning and AI technology to essentially forecast the demand for film. And, not just the creation part of it, but also marketing and, collection part of it too. And in 2016, we actually used our model to generate a plot line for a film that would rank the highest, a horror film that would rank really high on our algorithm. And we hired a film school student, made a trailer based on it, put it on Facebook, and we got 2.7 million views. And
2.7 million views.
Yes.
I thought I'd repeat that, because it's impressive.
Yeah. It's quite interesting to see, and there are thousands of comments and shares of people just saying, I want to go watch this on a film that doesn't even exist. So from a startup point of view, we proved there's demand for this content. And now this film is actually being financed for $3.5 million, and we're just packaging it all together and going to production hopefully next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what does that say about creativity, though? I mean, because you seem to be talking about like a recipe for commercial success. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. I think in a way we're trying to look for what are the combinations. So the algorithm is able to what we call plot elements. We break down movies into different premises, relationships in the movie, and we have about 40,000 unique different elements. And how do we combine them to maximize the likelihood to success in the marketplace? That's our objective at Greenlight. And yeah, we're certainly trying to find a direction for artists, filmmakers to go where they can say, hey, be creative, going to this direction, you have 90% chance to succeed. Right?
So but what I like in that, though, is that I feel that the creativity really lies on the human side. Because I don't know about you guys, I'm having a problem with the word creativity when it comes to machines, actually, because I'm wondering if we're kind of, dumping on the machine a concept that is, essentially human, because it's patterns, it's statistics, it's data. Can it be creativity?
Well, I mean, one of the problems is if we're getting that kind of standard onto computers, do we have the same standard on ourselves? Like, are we really creative? How many of us could make like an award-winning or like a really attractive trailer? Or like
well, I have qualities, but I mean, not that one.
Yep. And so this is one of those things, is that we have these expectations, these standards that we place on AI to make things that are as good as the best composers or the best artists. But creativity could just be as good as any average person's creativity. Like how well could we make like a piece of music? Could AI make something as good as that? Is it any different? Like, are we basing our creativity on the things we've seen before? The kind of music we like, the kinds of patterns that we've seen, and even unconsciously putting that into any new composition we put. I mean, in that case, it's really hard to be able to say that an algorithm that does these things and a human that does these things would be any different.
Is creativity anthropomorphism, do you think?
I think it is, and I just think it's a bit dangerous to continue saying AIs are creative and they have these human qualities, because it allows us to reduce our accountability to the behaviors of these AIs, and then what impacts does that have on society at large? And yeah, and then I think that kind of attitude might facilitate that apocalyptic AI takeover that we're all worried about?
I mean, it's true. Like, the AIs don't really know what they're doing as much. Like, they're being told, here's a bit of data, we want you to try to find the patterns in it and then create something new based off of it. And the meaning behind it, you know, the fact that this is like happy music versus sad music is lost. All they're knowing is we need to capture whatever this training does and then see if we can produce something that is in the same style.
Yeah, because even I was talking about AlphaGo earlier. AlphaGo didn't know it was playing a game, and it doesn't know what a game is in the human culture. I mean, it's not important for it. It just wants to win. So you know, that's a whole different set of ideals, if you wish. Let's try to understand, and I don't want to scare you folks, but I mean, we have a professor in computer science here. You might as well take advantage of your knowledge. Just to understand how an algorithm works, just a little bit. Like, let's take a GAN algorithm. How does it create?
Well,
How does it come up with new works?
so all of these, like usually when we're talking about AI, we're talking about machine learning and neural networks. There's a whole lot of AI out there that we're not going to be talking about today, but mostly we tend to focus on this. And in that case, it's basically like a pattern recognition classification tool.
What you were saying.
Right. Given a lot of data, you give it an objective to say, I want to identify, say, all of the faces in this image. And you let it know like where some of the faces are, and then after a while it starts to say, well, based on the images I've got, I will have some of my inputs be able to recognize like eyes and ears and noses, and eventually if I have like a well-trained network, it'll put those together to be able to identify the faces in an image. And so these days, I mean, this is sort of the core of AI. Like, you tell it to do a particular task, and it learns off of a huge amount of data how to do that task well.
So far, so good? Yeah, okay.
Hey, okay.
You've done this before, right?
What's the next part? So this is basically the basis of all of creative AI. It's just the task now is to create something, well, that follows the set of rules that all music or art or, I guess, scripts would follow. And to understand those rules enough to be able to create something that also adheres to those rules and maybe has some variations from what it trained off of.
So the GAN specifically, can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Sure. The GAN is the idea that you have
Let's say what it stands for, too.
Yeah.
I can never remember
Generative adversarial
networks.
Networks, right.
Yes.
Made in Montreal in 2014.
So you have two networks that each have a particular purpose. One of them is to create new things, and the other one's trying to determine the difference between what was created by a human and what was created by a computer. And so both of them are trying to achieve this task simultaneously. The one that's creating new things is trying to fool the differential machine, and the differential machine is trying to get much better at figuring out what's human and what's not. And the farther these things go, the better they become until you have a really good classifier and a really good generator.
Can you give us some examples of some of the works that you've seen that were generated by GAN?
Yeah, so GANism is an aesthetic that has come out of artists using GANs. And in many cases, artists will use data sets that are based on art historical paintings. So let's say it's often portraiture. And by using GANs and these large data sets, they'll develop new paintings or images based on that information. And this is a question I have for you, because a lot of the artworks that are coming out of the contemporary art world using GANs, the artworks are really just okay. Like, by human standards, they're not very artistically accomplished, but they're good for an AI. And I wonder about this script that you were talking about. Is this script a quality one from a human perspective, or is it cool because it was made by an algorithm?
That's a good question. So I think the first thing to understand here is that we're talking about two different set of AIs. You're talking about a full generation AI that's replacing human work here, but AI that we develop here is not a full loop. We take AI and only deal with the pattern, the systematic part of it. We show you how can you piece together elements that would create a high chance, high odds winning screenplay. but a human has to write the screenplay at the end. So before they write a single word, here's a guideline, how to write it. But now you still have to write the script, right? It's more of a tool to help human perform better at a task, which is achieving demand in the marketplace.
Okay.
Right.
Is it gonna take away all the imperfection that sometimes is part of a piece of work, whether it be a movie or any other type of work? I mean, isn't that a little bit part of the human sensitivity that goes into creating something new?
Yeah. So definitely, there's that the fear of taking the human sensitivity away. But from what I've learned in this process of making this piece of film, is that it does give you a lot of guidelines, a lot of talking points. I remember, for example, the script that we're working on, there was a scene in the third act where our writers wanted to do like a full fight scene for a horror film, like against the monster and all of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
But the AI would tell us, hey, this is a supernatural horror psychological script. The main audience is female, age under 34, like 18 to 34, and they would not want to see like a gory fight scene. They want to see more psychological. They want to see more relationship-based
really?
ending.
Okay.
So that would shift the creativity direction from the gory fighting to a total different 180-degree turn, right? Yes, it does shift your creativity in a different way, but it doesn't limit you of how you can go there. Right? It shows you the direction, but it doesn't tell you which turn to take.
Are we going to know, I mean, as an audience, are you going to let people know about the process that's behind making movies that way? I'm asking that question because what we've seen so far and what you guys have been telling me is that it's the way that it gets produced that is different when we work with AI. It's not necessarily the end result that we should look at in the end, because we've been trained as an audience to do that, right? I mean, give me a movie, give me a television show, give me a portrait, and I'm not really going to wonder if the author was feeling good that day or if they were going through something really bad. We should, but we don't. We value the end result. So does that mean that in an AI human co-authorship, we should look at it differently? Who wants to tackle that?
Well, I think end result is what matters, right? The process, how we do it, if you're interested in it, you should look into it. But if you just care about the end result, and for us, if you like horror movies, supernatural horror movies, watch the movie.
So same as before.
Yeah.
Shauna Jean Doherty, do you think that we should change the way that we value these works and value more of the process than the end result?
Right. I think in an art context, the final product or the artwork is always the most important, but the process is also very significant and is considered for all types of mediums. So we want to know, like, if you're using painting as a medium, an artist's process is significant to the story of the artwork and what we interpret from that work. I think AI and artwork right now is stuck in a position of fetishizing the AI process and not focusing enough on the final product, because a lot of the contemporary AI works that exist today all look quite similar because they're using the same data sets. And it's not enough for me as a critic and a curator to say, oh, but it was made with AI and that's interesting.
Right.
So I think the genre is still quite nascent and there's a lot of work to do.
I'm wondering if AI, I mean, I know your answer to that question, but I'm wondering if it can really help humans tell better stories in the sense that, make sure that their own truth comes out in a better way. How do you feel about that as a computer science professor?
Well, we are interested in the process and only helping in a way that it helps humans be able to do whatever they need to do. right? With all kinds of computer science tasks, it's all about just providing an assistant. And in that way,
So it's a tool.
It's a tool, right? Like everything is, and AI in general has been like a cognitive tool. The way that scissors or lawnmowers are physical tools. These are supposed to be tools that help your cognitive processes. And if part of it is creativity, then the AI can act as an assistant. I mean, we're talking about, how it can create artworks on its own, but the most useful way that it can be present in the creation process is as, the supporter of the human that's trying to make stuff. So like one of the products that I make is for music generation. And we make almost a compositional recommender system. So you're composing, you get to a point, and you don't know what you're going to do next. It'll say, people who have done the kinds of sequences of notes you've done often go in this direction, or this direction, or this direction. Would any of these things help? And then the composer can actually say, oh, that's a good idea. I'm not going to use that exactly, but it helps me unblock myself to figure out what I need to do next.
That's interesting, and I see you nodding, because that's something that speaks to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's how you use it?
Yeah, in a similar way as Steve described, our system is able to give recommendations of where the story would go and how do you piece together these plot elements and achieve objective. That's probably a little different than what Steve's trying to do. We're aiming for the demand in the marketplace, commercial success. That's our goal for the AI, the objective function for the AI. But not how to mimic a piece of art.
Ultimately, do you feel that AI is going to hold a very important space in the creative industries as a whole?
I think so. I think it's already begun in a lot of aspects of it, especially what we're doing here. Not just creation, but also marketing. We're able to tell location-wise, geographical location-wise, which theater is going to grow the highest for this type of film, this particular film, and what's the audience like? What demographics they are, what age they are, what gender they are, what do they like to do, what are their interests. We're able to tell a lot of details, even just based on a piece of concept. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. And these days, I work a lot with the video game design community in
Right.
Toronto, and it's a lot of relatively small studios, except for like one or two. And so for people who want to have music in their games, if you can't afford to hire a composer, then what are you going to do? Well, we can create AI that would take training pieces and say, if you wanted to create background music that's in this style, put it through our system, and it'll create original music in that style that you can use in your games.
Oh, wow, the musicians out there are really happy about that.
We're not going to be replacing Beethoven or anything. It's just background music. It's like elevator music. You want something, but you don't have either the resources or the time to compose something. But you have something that is okay. It's good enough. Yeah.
What do you think are the main challenges when it comes to unfolding AI in the creative industries? Are there technical challenges? Are there ethical challenges? I see you nodding. You've thought about that.
Yeah, from an art world perspective, I think it's going to take a bit more time for AI to have a central role in artistic practice, largely because of the resources and the specialization that's required. But more and more I'm seeing collaborations going on between artists and computer scientists, which I think is really productive. And even in the commercial industries and the use of AI, I think artists should be part of that conversation. Because artists are known for, they break things and they hack things and they use things in alternative ways to explore the depths of certain tools. And I think, integrating artists into that dialogue will help maybe to examine the ethical issues that are at play with AI. So think about it, guys.
Well, that and the authorship question is really interesting. Like, I know that you wanted the algorithm to be one of the authors anyway of your script, and that's not possible yet.
Yeah, the lawyer said no. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's another question that's come up.
Definitely. Well, traditionally, if you are to work with, say, another writer on the project, and that writer says, "Hey, your story needs to have this, and that," he will get credit. For sure, right? Because he gave you ideas how to shape your work.
Of course.
Right? And that's what the AI is doing to the screenplay. but it's not a natural person, so you can't really give it credit.
It doesn't have a mortgage to pay. I mean, it has no feelings.
It has AWS bills that we have to, look into it. But yeah, not in the traditional sense, no.
Right.
But I like to, reiterate, the challenges that we face in the AI industry. I think it's important to understand all the AIs we're talking about today is still very narrow.
Right.
Right? It's doing one task really good, but it's not like a human conscious, like you can throw anything at it and then you'll come up with a solution that may not be the best, but come up with something. If you tell AlphaGo to write music, you'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, error, right?
Right.
So that's a huge challenge. I think the current, if you're trying to apply AI to the creative world, and data, right? You always need more data than you can have.
Absolutely.
There's not that much data, in film, maybe in music. There's more, but more data, so it's going to be better.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're right to mention that difference between narrow and general AI. We're Terminator pretty much, with that, full machine trying to imitate human behavior. So we're not there yet, folks. So we're all good. But yeah, so even when it comes to narrow AI, though, I mean, it can be a problem. Authorship can be a problem. I mean, algorithms can come up with things that may resemble other types of works. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I know what you're referencing, but before I talk about that, I want to speak to the first work that was sold at auction, the first AI work.
Right.
It was called Portrait of Edmond de Bellamy, and it was by a collective that's based in France, and they included a piece of the code on the portrait as a signifier of the authorship of the work. And the piece sold for $400,000, but of course, it's the human artist that set the algorithm in motion that got that money. But then there's a further complication to that, because the data set that this art collective was using was put together by someone else.
Right.
And they only very moderately modified the code that was used to produce the final artwork. So that raises a question of who authored the work and who deserves to be credited for the work. And when we start seeing money changing hands, who should be remunerated for that work. But you're referencing Adam Basanta's piece.
Right.
I think the work was called All We'd Ever Need Is One Another. And it was shown actually recently at Division Gallery here in Toronto. So the piece, it's sort of complicated, so I'll try to explain it relatively quickly. But it's two commercial scanners that are laid on their side, and they scan each other. And then an algorithm is randomly choosing settings that modifies the image that is produced. And then once an image is produced, it's another algorithm, I guess, scans an existing database of existing artworks and tries to identify a match between the new scanner image and an existing artwork online. And if the new artwork resembles an existing artwork enough by a threshold of, I think, like 80%, that the new image would be printed out and put on the gallery wall, and this new artwork would be titled after the existing artwork. And this got Adam into a lot of trouble. He's based in Montreal, and a Montreal artist is currently, I believe, suing him for copyright infringement. And that raises this whole set of questions in relation to Canadian copyright law. Who is accountable and responsible for that infringement? Is it Adam's algorithm, or is it him as an artist? And I think that's still being explored in the courts.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about that one.
No?
Most of the ones that I've been dealing with have been music-based.
Okay.
So if like the algorithms that we create are trained off of like Britney Spears, there is a non-zero chance that it'll reproduce an exact Britney Spears song, because just the randomized generation will end up making reproducing one of the original pieces.
And what does that say for authorship when it comes to music?
Well, the thing is, you would never be able to get it to happen again. So
Right.
even if she heard it and she said, oh, you copied my song, you play it again, and it would generate a new song, and it would always be in her style, but never exactly right.
Huh.
But even if it is in her style, is that copyright, or do other artists who adapt other styles, do they have to pay royalties to whoever they copy from? Or is it an homage? I don't know.
An homage, yes.
You know what?
Oh, thank God for that, right?
I create the tools and I leave it to better people to figure out the answers to these questions.
Right. Do you worry about that sometimes? Is it possible, I don't know, to tweak a scenario to make it more like a certain type of filmmaker, or?
What do you mean, like tweaking a scenario so you would offend the filmmaker?
No, so you'll get something like more closer to the style of a filmmaker, of a famous filmmaker, or something like that.
Well, I think for our specific example, it's quite hard, right? We only work in the the defined 40,000 plot elements space. The final film can still look very different than the screenplay. The same industries. There's always 3 films being made on one project. One that's been written, one that's been shot, and that one's being edited.
Right.
So there's a lot of variation in there. What we're trying to do here is really just say, hey, this is the direction to go. How you get there, it's all your call. It's still a very creative process.
How do you see the film and TV industry in like the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, film and TV, or films particularly, visual storytelling
Right.
is probably one of the oldest industry we have, right? It's hard to say because for any artwork, I was just having a conversation earlier to this, for any creative artwork to achieve a critical mass, you need distribution. You need to get down to the end consumer. It's been changing a lot, nowadays, especially in the film and TV world. You have the streamers, Netflix, and now Disney Plus, and streaming wars going on. But you still need money to advertise your film, right? So it really depends if you have what we call the P&A budget in the film world to get that content down to the end consumer to create the marketing of it. So it depends.
It depends. How do you guys have any insight for the screen industries when it comes to AI development in the next few years? How will that unfold? How can that have an impact on how creatives work?
I mean, I wouldn't say my expertise is in the screen world, but in the art world, when we were talking about distribution, that's another challenge I think that artists who are working with AI are going to face, because we have the commercial gallery system. So an artist is represented by a gallerist, and they help to disseminate their works and make money for the artist. And few gallerists now, especially in Canada, have the expertise to exhibit AI-based works or code-based works, and that's just a huge problem. And like the Art Gallery of Ontario isn't necessarily known for its enthusiasm towards new media art or digital art, unfortunately, and though the MAC in Montreal does tend to show media art, so that's exciting. But yeah, the level of expertise is a bit of an obstacle for a full proliferation of AI artwork in the art industry.
That is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and I was thinking with AI, it's mostly been used to help solve little tasks, right? I mean, music is one. My music work was originally based off of my language work, which was about, you could actually create scripts based off of existing scripts that you like and you want to imitate. But it's also things like visual effects, being able to help coordinate schedules. Like, there's a lot of little tasks that humans do that are important, but maybe tedious.
Yeah.
And AI is very good at handling those tedious tasks that we don't want to do, right? Like any kind of machine.
I was going to say, I've heard that before. I mean, that's pretty much, why we wanted machines in the first place, to kind of do, the sort of things that, or automate certain tasks that we didn't want to do.
Right. So, I mean, when it comes to the screen, like, we think about the end product again, but I'm thinking more like all the little things, the little tasks that go into actually making this product, and how there's more to what AI can contribute to than just the actual physical thing you see. You know.
But as Ms. Doherty was saying, it takes the technical, well, I was going to say language, not necessarily, but I mean, people have to feel comfortable around AI to use AI, right?
Well, they do already, right? Like we have it every time we look up something on Google. You know, we're comfortable with AI, and every time we use a home assistant.
Well, we don't know we're comfortable. We're comfortable, but
yep.
we don't know we're actually dealing with AI.
Yep. People just take it for granted that this thing works, and they don't think too much about how it works. And AI, that's the perfect measure of AI. If no one notices that it's doing a good job, then it's doing it right.
And the result that matters.
Right. I was just going to bounce back to you. I'm like, that's exactly your point, right? You know, if you have a better movie in the end, that's what you're looking for, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. I wanted to open up the questions to the floor. So if you guys have any questions, please let us know. There's going to be probably a mic going around so you can pick their brains on AI and creativity. So if there's any question, yeah, there's one here. I don't know if there's a mic right here that you can use, guys, right here next to the stage. So we'll be getting to you in just a second. Oh, there you go. Hi.
Oh.
Does it work?
Psst, come back.
Yeah.
Oh, he's going to turn on. Technology.
There you go.
Hello?
Yeah.
Great. I'm curious about, since this is a Telefilm CMF event, the parameters around Canadianness, because we are, you know, in a global media landscape that is internet-based and digital. You know, if a Canadian company goes out and watches, for example, absorbs all the anime ever created and creates a Japanese movie. It's a Canadian company, but it's a Japanese movie. Would that, you know, where are the lines drawn between Canadian and foreign or international projects?
I love your question, and I can't wait to see the answer. I guess that's directed to you, perhaps?
So you would train, your question is, if the algorithm is trained off animation and it makes animation...
Like Japanese anime.
Oh, Japanese anime.
Yeah.
And it's made in Canada.
Yes.
How would you say, okay?
Would you then go to Telefilm and say, I'm making this movie, this animated movie?
Well,
and
anyone here from Telefilm will know they have the check boxes, right? If you check all the boxes, you still get the money from Telefilm, don't you? I don't know, maybe.
I mean, it's like having a Japanese restaurant in Toronto.
Yeah.
Is it Japanese or
I don't think
Canadian?
you would check one of the Canadian culture boxes,
Right.
but I don't know.
Yeah.
If you have all the producers or the actors and you know directors or being Canadian, you're still qualified for Canadian content, right? On Telefilm
So
side.
it would expand, perhaps, on what's Canadian.
Yeah.
So, but defining what's Canadian is always a challenge, right? Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, we have it's a big country, you know, and you know there are many different ways of being Canadian. I mean, of course, you know, from a Telefilm and CMF perspective, we've had to narrow it down into certain pieces, but still, I mean, these things could evolve, or I don't know. I mean, we'd have to ask, but yeah.
Yeah, like, would there be, down the line, would there be a quota saying you have to ingest this much Canadian content into your AI
Right.
to
I love it.
calculate that? Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I mean, we could totally do it, right? Like if you're making a script based on existing scripts, if you're making music based on existing music, you have the ability to put your training set together and determine how many portions of like various genres you want to put in. So yeah, if you need 25%, what's the percentage these days? Oh, whatever. Like 25% Canadian content, then put 25% Canadian scripts in your training data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of course the data has an influence on what's going to come out of it. I mean, you were referring to that Edmond de Bellamy portrait. I mean, they chose I don't know, thousands and thousands of portraits from the 14th to the 18th century. I think so. Obviously, you're going to get something that looks a little bit like a piece from that period. Although it's a very long period, but still, so you can't. it wasn't going to be Picasso, you know? So.
Yeah, and it also was like a chubby white dude.
Right.
So it's also reflective of the biases that are internal to your data sets, which I think is something that needs
is
to be
an
considered.
extremely good point. Yeah.
Yeah,
Biases.
Because we didn't talk too much about the ethics side of like where the training data comes from, right? So yeah, if you train off of a corpus that is all oriented towards, say, like early Hollywood, where they were trying to market towards a particular audience, then you're only going to generate stuff that markets towards that audience. So you're not going to be expanding or pushing boundaries or looking to attend to like changing demographics.
Well, I would tend to argue that the video game industry kind of went through the same thing in the 80s, right? They narrowed it down to young boys and they kind of forgot about everybody else.
Yeah, it was sort of it fed on itself a little bit. I mean, now people are aware of it. You know, they're trying to inject, different people from different backgrounds with different life experiences to create different kinds of games. But yeah, that shows the danger that can happen when you've got this self-perpetuating system.
Of course. So anyway, if you come up with a definition for Canadian-ness, let us know. We're interested. Yeah, we have another question right there and behind. Hi.
Hi. Actually, just building off of that. So far, I guess your AI, you've picked like a certain style or a certain genre and then tried to generate something off of that. And that brings up problems with like copyright infringement. Is it possible for you to take two different genres and like layer them and merge them and then I guess further blur the lines of copyright?
It's tough. So the experiments that we've done with this, the closer the two genres are to each other, the less jarring it is when it goes back and forth between the different models. So one of the things we were talking about before is that some of the original experiments with combining pieces were mostly within like Britney Spears, because a lot of her songs were very similar to each other. So you couldn't tell when you switched.
Yeah, we noticed. We got that, yeah.
But start combining like Britney with Bach, and you start getting something that goes really, like it'll make the transitions, but it'll be very clear that you're going from one style to another.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be seamless. So you could, but the more diverse you make your training set, the less coherent the final product is going to be.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Yep.
I don't know, like a Britney Bach thing would have been funny. I don't know.
If we could figure out how to do it ourselves, then yeah. But the idea is, the computers kind of have that limitation. They're working off of whatever they got. And if you only give it certain, like really disparate sources, then it's going to have trouble trying to find like a happy medium between the two.
I know that Mario Klingemann is another AI artist who uses a data set that he's hand-picked the artworks that the algorithm is referencing to create a new portrait. But since he selected works from a variety of styles, his artworks tend to be more abstract than the typical GAN work and more sort of like goopy looking.
Yep.
And that's probably because of the very distinct genres that are in the data set.
Yeah, like it can't figure out a good midpoint between things. It'll produce Bach and then it'll produce Britney. And it only knows how to produce things that it's seen before. So if it hasn't seen it before, then it can't figure out, well, what would the midpoint be between these two styles?
So then from like a math perspective, is there a way to like grow that data set and like use your midpoints for like, all those math methods?
We've tried that. Putting in non-zero possibilities for things that it hasn't seen before. What happens is it just goes off the rails and goes careening down the hillside. It's just, once you start opening it up, then it starts producing things that don't have any basis in human compositions. And then everything that gets produced ends up sounding wrong or strange.
Right.
Foreign. Yeah. It needs a comfort area of space that it's explored already, things that it can train off of and then produce stuff within. So we're talking about the boundaries, right?
Right.
Creativity has to have certain boundaries where if it goes too far, it ends up sounding terrible.
Right. So it's new, but it's not necessarily valuable, as we were saying before. Yeah.
So the training is what creates that space that it can play within. But it can't go too far outside of the space without creating things that it has no understanding of what's good or bad.
Very interesting. Thank you. Do we have other questions? Yeah, there's one right there in the back. Hi.
Hello. So I've heard a couple of attempts at generative music that were trained on a particular artist or on a genre. And they, in addition to the problem you mentioned, it seems to me that they end up a lot of the time sounding like a sort of generic mishmash of all the different songs they were trained on without any of the genius of any one of those individual songs. Maybe less of a problem for Britney Spears, but in general, I think it's a problem. And it seems to me that some of the older efforts at generated music, like even like Stockhausen or whoever it was that experimented with like randomness in their music, and the old CPU Bach was a lot more limited in what it could do, but it suffered less from those problems. Do you think there's any anything we could learn from the old algorithms or more procedural techniques that might help with this in music or other creative efforts?
Yeah, the old style algorithms were mostly rule-based, where they would use some of the human intuition in order to create the rules that the algorithms would use in order to generate new music. All the things that are happening these days tend to be more data-driven. So we don't really make any rules. We just say, look, the data's there. Figure out, based on the sequences you see, what sequences are legal and which ones aren't. And yeah, it took a while before we started to converge on something that didn't sound awful. So for instance, we found out that bars turned out to be a significant thing. You had to have bars in order for the structure of your music to be sensible. Otherwise, it just sounded like a mishmash of notes. But even with the bars, it's still, the best we can do is have it sound like a distracted jazz pianist, right? Like it's playing, but it's not really going anywhere. It's just making something that's musical.
Can you not do the same thing with like phrases and themes that you did for bars?
We're working on that, but we're still limited by data at this point, because then every layer of, like, I guess, meaning that you try to capture requires a large corpus. So for instance, some people asked about how we would create happy music. We have to take all the music we've got currently that we're training off of and then create segments for happy, sad, angry music. And then every time we do that, our model becomes more narrow. We run into sparse data problems. And so we end up reproducing some of the original pieces because there isn't enough examples of happy music to create something general without reproducing some of what we've been training off of. So yeah, we need data. A lot more of it.
Yeah, that's a big problem, right? And that's a problem you faced as well with Greenlight Essentials. And what did you do to build the database that you have? You actually had to get down and do the gritty work and listen to movies and...
Yeah, we hired a bunch of people, just watch movies and help our supervised system to learn, give a training set.
Wow.
Thousands of movies, just watch them and tag them, tell the algorithm if it's making the right decision or not, so the accuracy can go up. But yeah, data is a huge problem. And if you look around, all the breakthrough AIs that Google's been doing, the AlphaGo or whatever trended, Alpha Star, play StarCraft and all of that, they're all games, right? And the response, the final result, can be easily simulated. It can easily be simulated, but can the measurement of how famous an artwork or how popular a movie be easily simulated? You have to show this to the entire globe and see how many people will buy. That complicates a lot. So it gets to close to like the P versus NP, I feel like, the problem, right? If you know the result of something, are you able to do it, right? So it gets a little bit philosophical that way, but we do need a lot of data, and if you can simulate this activity that you're trying to build your AI in, it gets really easy. But when it comes down to music or film or creative work, you can only kind of work with what's available here and trying to extract as much information as you can.
I'm listening to you, and I'm just wondering, that must take so much resources, like a lot of people, but money and time. Yeah. I mean, that's a challenge, isn't it? Yeah,
it was. We're still working on it, but we got through thousands of films now, and
How many?
Currently, we have over 4,000, I think, in the database. That's all tagged. Everything's great, but it's continuously expanding. But yeah.
By what metric are you choosing the films? Like, what do you consider a good film? Are you choosing films that are made by a diversity of people?
So I think that differentiates from a lot of artwork, because film. The reason why film is interesting to me is because a lot of the financial information is public, right? You can see the box office, you can see how much the demand is, or how wide the film is open to. We have many different metrics to measure if this film outperformed, underperformed. A lot of the performance actually depends on how wide the film opens. You can't compare Avengers to like an independent film. It's not comparable. But if you factor in what's the systematic part of the marketing, you can then compare the two if you adjust them, right? So we have a lot of AI in the background that would do that work for us to capture that non-linear trend in the marketing, in the seasonality, all of that, so we can compare two films, right? So any film you can see out there goes into our data set.
And what do you mark? Like what's like when you listen to a movie? What are you looking for? The emotional parts? How can you tell if it's something that's of value?
So so as I said before, we have about 40,000 different plot elements that we have. So they can be relationships presented in the movie. Is this about a mother and daughter story? Is this about a husband and wife? Right? And what premise is this? Is this happening in a small town? Is it a dog movie? Is it a cat movie? All these things. And we have 40,000 of these unique elements.
Wow.
And people have to go through a laundry list of questionnaire after watching each movie and say, hey, is this present? And how much, how important this element is in the movie? And after composing all this data, we can, start coming up with very interesting insights.
And are you done with the database, or are you trying to grow it? Or?
It's always growing. New movies come out, right?
Yeah.
So we're constantly feeding into the data, and the algorithm is just getting better and better.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do we have another question? Yeah. The mic is coming to you. Hi.
There. Yeah, hi. I appreciate the portrait that all of you are giving of us, of the kind of cutting edge technologies and the way that artists are using AI as a creative tool, and there's a long history of that with the emergence of art and technology that, we go back to the 19th century in photography. There's always adaptation of individuals or, creative sectors augmenting what they do with a new tool. I also happen to think, and I just want to maybe push back a little bit on this conversation, in that I think there's also a certain danger in talking about it in that way without looking at the larger context of what AI, its implications are for the sector. I mean, the title of this panel is Creative Industries. In particular, I think the comment about how AI is at its best when it's invisible and we don't realize that it's operating, it's in the background, it's just sort of there. And the reason I say this is, we are all, many people in this room know that creative industries are a place where the is mostly inhabited by people who are doing cognitive and intellectual labor. And what we may be facing with AI is the beginning of a moment where enormous sectors of the occupational sectors are becoming obsolete because those kinds of cognitive and intellectual labors can be basically automated, and there's lots, and I think right now, you see, like if you look at Jack's project with the screenplay, sure, right now it can come up with the plot points, but where will we be in 10, 20 years when you're talking about writing screenplays, doing a lot of the creative labor on the sets, when some of that can be generated in-house within computers? What's to stop the industry from saying, well, why do we need to hire people at union scale rates, and why do we need to hire a screenwriter? What does it mean for the Writers Guild? These kinds of things. So I really like to have, I understand that it's important to have a tool, but can you give us some perspective on what the implications are? I think they're vast for what it means to be a creative individual in an economy, whether it's the art economy, the screen economy. There are different aspects of the creative sector. So I'd just like to hear a little bit more of that, because I do think there could be some very potentially huge downsides and risks to what we're facing as creatives.
Who wants to go first? I'll go, okay. So I've heard some stuff when it comes to like our composition tool. There's some composers who have expressed their dismay to downright defiance about it. And what we're trying to say is it's never going to replace a real, like someone who actually is creating novel music. What we were trying to do is address a pain point, which was people who wanted to have music but couldn't afford a composer, or wanted to have someone, or even like like an automated system that could help a system because they had no musical knowledge, but they knew what they wanted to make. So as far as that was concerned, that was what we were trying to do. But with any technology, what we try to make it for and then what other people use it for is different. And so, yeah, we've had a lot of concern about, well, this is going to replace composers. Well, I mean, the composers who are out there right now, they're not exactly rolling in the dough anyway. The idea of taking some of these jobs away isn't popular. And the only thing we can try to say to that is, right now, the work that the AI can do is usually what's considered like the menial kind of jobs. Like you want to make background music that no one's really going to pay attention to, or something that isn't going to be like the forefront of what people are going to notice, but is just there. That's mostly what we're capable of doing at this point.
At this point.
At this point. I know, that's the...
And that's what he's worried about.
That's the caveat, right? Is that we are opening the door, but we don't know quite how far this journey is going to go. And right now we're just trying to make the music better without thinking of the consequences of, okay, so who is this going to impact later? Mm-hmm. It's more like AI is just trying to solve these interesting cognitive problems and then figure out later what people are going to use it for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In a fine art context, I'm not concerned about it. I don't think we're going to enter a place where artists are supplanted by AIs, because within artwork, when you buy an artwork, you're not only buying a piece, you're also buying the artist and their brand and their history and their intention. So I think an AI is devoid of all of those additional dimensions that make artwork valuable or significant in our lives.
What about the art industry? What about people who write wall text for museums, people who work archives, people who support that industry?
Yeah, I think those cultural workers are good at their jobs because they have to reflect so deeply on human experience. Mm-hmm. I don't think an algorithm can write a thoughtful, generous, and compassionate piece of wall text, which is a job that I have done, and it's actually incredibly hard to write something that's clear. And I mean, I really don't think there's this funny website that will auto-generate artist statements, and you can just click a bunch of boxes of what your areas of interest are, and it generates this really art-speaky thing that kind of sounds like an artist statement, but it's just garbage. It's not it's not meaningful.
Right. That's an important word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Meaningful. Because if you want something to be meaningful, then you have to understand the meaning behind the whole piece. I mean, and it's understanding context. And that's going back to what we were saying before between the narrow AI and the rest. I mean, it's very task-oriented for now. And, depending on which scientist you're talking to, and I would refer to Yoshua Bengio, we've heard of before, he doesn't think he'll be seeing that in his lifetime anyway, this general AI who can do everything that humans can. He doesn't really believe that. So, I mean, then what's left? Well, what's left is narrow AI, and the way that we are using it is really in separate ways, in very distinct ways. But we still have to be there to have the intention to use it. We still have to be there to value the work. I mean, is it good? Is it not good? Do we have to redo it? So I think that humans are still very much intertwined in everything that AI produces right now. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that it won't be like a huge change. I think that new technologies, especially the ones that are this disruptive, can bring about a lot of change. But that's happened before. This is not necessarily new. I mean, every time there's a new technology coming on, there's a lot of people that are scared about changing the ways that they're doing things or changing the ways that things are working, but it doesn't mean that it will disappear. Will it change? Of course. But how? I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I heard that there's a new movie coming out with James Dean, where they're using deepfake AI to be able to get current actors, and then they put James Dean's face, and then he can live again.
Wow.
I mean, it's kind of a cool tool. I mean, I don't know. It's
I
creepy.
feel shivers. Like some people think it's cool, and other people are like, oh my gosh, does he know about it?
Just the fact that it's possible means that there's suddenly opening up a bunch of possibilities that people hadn't considered before, right? You could have Tom Cruise can do all his own stunts now without ever leaving his home, because the stunt person can actually have Tom Cruise's face.
Right.
Right. So then his death-defying acts aren't quite as meaningful anymore, but at least you can do new things.
Yeah.
And so
that's a valuable point. I remember a panelist in Montreal telling me, is AI going to be able to help us tell better stories? She said, I don't know, but new stories for sure. Mm-hmm. Things that we had never thought of, or things that, ways that to tell stories differently, absolutely, and that's intriguing for now. Mm-hmm. But industry-wise, I hear your concerns, and those are concerns that we hear all the time. But just to be the devil's advocate, we've heard those same statements, when radio and television went at it, and cinema, and it's always a little bit hard to see like a new technology coming in, but things kind of fall into place eventually. It's never the same, of course. It's not going to be the same industry. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
It seems to me that the way this started was from the middle up in regards to the fact that this is based on creative industries. If we're going back to creativity and art is often future casting, 10 years out, telling us what to expect. It's bravery, it's anarchy, and it's often subversive. How do you see possibly building in the needed social good of subversiveness and anarchy? And on the negative side, how do you see the possibility of building in subtle propaganda from another social side?
Wow.
I don't know about programming the anarchy. Right now, all of the stuff that I've seen has been taking existing work and then making more of it, as opposed to like breaking new ground. As for the subversive side, well, there is the ethical issues, right? If you train off of everything that's been done before, then you perpetuate some of the structures and systems that we've already got in place. And so, like there's countless examples of things like legal AI that would automatically determine whether someone gets bail or not, and it was trained off of existing cases, which would negatively impact African American offenders.
Because of the biases in the data.
Yep.
Right.
Or even things like computer vision. When I was doing face recognition, for a while it could not recognize non-white faces because that was most of its training set. So there is that kind of idea that these systematic biases are built into the AI because its training set is based off of something that's, our past, not our future. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Is that what I was thinking about is the actual positiveness and importance of art must be subversive
Yep.
and build in anarchy if it is to be good art and not just commercial in the sense of market-driven profit. So what I'm saying is, if you strip out before you go into the market-driven and you deal with art and creativity in that essence, then we're starting from social good.
Yep.
We're not starting from just profit-driven and stale-dated capitalism.
You said it.
Off to him.
I mean, what do you must get that a lot.
Yeah, well, it's always a struggle, right? Creatives in the suits. You have independent filmmakers, you have major studios. I think, at the end of the day, you can do whatever you want, right? If you have $2 million to spend on your passion project, go for it. But if you have an investor, you have to be responsible for his return, or you won't get the money again, right? That's the end of the line. If you have $2 million, you want to do anything with it, go for it. Go spend your money, make a movie, and nobody sees it, you're fine with it, go for it. It's no problem with it, right? But if you have an investor that says, you promised me 13% internal rate of return, and I don't see a dime back after walking through that red carpet. Where's my money, right?
Yeah, it's
some of them do, some of them they don't.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah, there is this idea that technology is supposed to have a democratization effect that allows people to, like just regular people, to have the tools that would normally belong to large studios or corporations. I mean, that's the theory. In essence, there are still people, like more independent creations are possible now, but we still need to find a good way of getting them out, so that it's not enough to just create it, but have people recognize it and, see the things that you're creating with the technology that we provide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the resources and the data sets and the financial backing really advantages commercial ventures, certainly in the realm of AI. So like I said off the top, I think a dialogue needs to be pursued. It's the responsibility almost of large institutions and commercial ventures to enter into a dialogue with artists.
Yeah.
Nice, interesting. Thank you. We have time for maybe one more question. Was there another question in the room? Oh, yeah, okay. There's the mic is coming. Oh, there you go.
I was just going to ask about the consumption of AI by AI. So when you start, if you add one of your AI-generated movies to your 4,000 in the list, and then you start adding to that, then you start using AI content. You don't have to rely on human participation at all. You can start generating your own data and so on. What happens there?
Well, I think it's at the current state, we won't be seeing the AI-generated work to skew the entire data set, right? Even at the current state. But when we get to that point, if everything's generated by AI, then we have to worry something that you're mentioning, right? It could skew the data set at that point. But I think in the future, the near future, it's going to be really fragmented still, right? There's some work that's being co-produced or produced by AI, but there's still going to be a large amount of work that's produced just naturally by human.
Yeah.
Right, we can't hear you. Humans are consumers of AI only at this point, is that what you said?
Yeah, there are some algorithms that, once you generate new content, you feed that back into the database to help strengthen some of the models. That is kind of dangerous because that means that you're basically taking a snapshot of what humans like right now and you're perpetuating it. It's not to say that, even though that's what kind of these algorithms can do naturally very well, we can also adjust them to be able to take in new content and new ideas. The ideas behind these is that you have weights inside these models that can give like a higher weight to certain factors they know produce good output. All you have to do is to say, look, I want the human's input to actually always be counted for. Like you always want to make sure that the human voice is present in the model and is given a high weight so that you don't just get into this steady state of content, but you're always adjusting to whatever the current zeitgeist happens to be. So it's possible. We just need to be conscious about making that there or putting that in there when we're making these models.
And that is such a beautiful way to end this panel. Thank you so much, Zhang, Shauna Jean Doherty, Steve Engels. Thank you for great questions by Facebook. Thank you for being there. And we'll take a short break, and you have everything you need there to have a little drink and food, and we'll meet you back here afterwards with David Usher in a great conversation about his work and the work he's done with AI. So thank you. See you later.